Define and defy, hackathon, Moralis and Google. 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 Define, hackathon, Moralis and Google. Define and define, hackathon, Moralis and Google. Define and define, hackathon, Moralis and Google. Define and define, hackathon, Moralis and Google. 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 Moralis and Google.
Welcome back, everybody, to the second live stream of Moralis and Google, where we are defining DeFi together this hackathon. Today, or I should say during this stream, we're here with one of our bounty providers, Axelar, and Jake representing them. I'm going to bring Jake on screen with us here. Now, Axelar is an amazing interoperability solution compatible with more than one of our sponsored track networks this hackathon, and we're going to get deep into how you can use it, how it works. We're going to look at the Block Explorer, a lot of exciting stuff. So strap in. We will be taking questions as well. So if you have a question, pop it in the chat. If we don't get it right away, we'll loop back around to it later on in the stream. Jake, the floor is yours, sir.
Hey guys, thank you for having me on. My name is Jake. I'm on the BD team here over at Axelar. I've essentially been here since we went live in about January of this year. Really wanted to spend the majority of the session today going over like what I'm seeing in the space. I probably talk to on average 10 projects every day. Really, like what I cover here is our Cosmos ecosystem, our Polkadot ecosystem, and then all the inbound traffic that we have in terms of some of the newer builders that are thinking about cross-chain strategies, how to architect them, what are the benefits of them, and then I also manage our accelerator and grants program here at Axelar. So, kind of the concept of start with why. Just first wanted to get you guys like thinking about like why this makes sense, why it's actually more scalable and easier to build cross-chain. The transition that I've started to see from like when I first started here. And just so you guys know, like remind me at the end, like we do have support systems past just this hackathon, right? So we're actually in the middle of doing a grants and accelerator program with Longhash. We can share the links to that where Longhash will be investing in 10 projects, $100,000. And we're also running a grants program on the side of that where we will be giving out 20 to 30 grants up to $20,000. And that is on top of the $2,500 that you can win with this hackathon. So there's a lot of kind of support systems that we have here. Anybody's always free to ping me. My Telegram is just Jake_Kane. And you can pretty much get like full access to our entire team here throughout the process and throughout your build.
I'm just sharing my screen right now. We have the Discord support link for Axelar up on the screen right now. I'm just going to quick read that off. It is discord.com/invite, lowercase a, uppercase RZ, 3R, lowercase a, 6, lowercase f, 7D. And that should bring you to the Axelar Discord. If you need support there, that's available not only during the hackathon, but also afterwards. Sorry to interrupt, Jake. Just wanted to share that with our listeners here.
No, all good. All good. That's perfect. So I think I'm going to start with like why build cross-chain, just so everybody knows from like a very high level. Axelar is a blockchain that connects blockchains. So we believe that we have the most secure interoperability infrastructure. Really, the reason being is because we are a blockchain, right? So we share the same security model as the blockchains that we connect. We have rate limits on top of that, a bunch of other like enhanced security features. I'll walk you guys through the stack in a little bit. But first, like just like preliminary understanding, right? We can send any message to or from any chain within our network. Everybody that is sponsoring the event here, we are connected to those chains. And when I say message, it's any payload, any arbitrary contract call to or from any chain. So we can read, write, execute functions, query. It's like interoperability in its pure sense. And it completely changes the way that we like go about thinking about architecture when we're building newer applications, right? Like if you're taking an existing application cross-chain that's already deployed on a bunch of different places, like it's a little bit different, but you guys are in this amazing place where for the first time, right? Like we can build out a cross-chain application that's going to be able to aggregate yields from all over the place. That's like really going to give you a competitive advantage where you can go and kind of have a one-stop shop where users can be like certain that they're getting the best rates, they're getting the best yields. And you can kind of have that peace of mind when you go about building in this. So when I started back in January, right? When you thought about building a cross-chain application, what that looked like was taking your application and deploying it on, 5, 7, 10 different blockchains. And that's how people thought about going cross-chain back then. And the reason why you go cross-chain in the first place, right, is because you have a total addressable market that you're able to go and tap into all of the liquidity within that ecosystem. And essentially, right, like, we're talking about like billions of dollars of liquidity depending on the chains that you're deploying in. But what we also see in the space is that like more and more chains are coming out every day. Every conference I go to, like we have our Block Explorer up, but there's probably like 50 new chains that come up to me. So like, I do not think that, I haven't even made up my mind if I think like there's going to be the big four, right? Like it's too hard to tell right now. It's definitely not looking like that as we get into like more application specific blockchains and blockchains with like different features and functionality that are better for certain things that you can use blockchain for in general. But what Axelar does now is it allows an application developer to go and build on the blockchain that makes the most sense for their use case, plug into our network. So you don't build on our chain, you plug into our network via gateway contracts and API calls, and you get the same outcome, right? So you're able to send messages to and from all of the other chains within our ecosystem, and you get access to all of that liquidity. And there's like a bunch of different problems with kind of deploying on these other chains and kind of like the traditional sense, right? Like it's not scalable as we get more blockchains. You don't have feature parity between blockchains. Like as they upgrade, you're dealing with all of the upgrades on your application. They're still just siloed apps. Like you're running 7 different instances of your application that can't talk to each other. And you just run into problems. So like some of the existing applications that we're seeing out there today, we're still using general message passing to allow the applications to talk to each other if they've already like gone and deployed in that strategy. Because then it allows you to have like all of your information in one place, and then you can kind of like run your business and run your applications better. But with the new ones, what we've been seeing is deploy on one, and then send messages to all of the other applications, which allows you to get the same access to liquidity, allows you to get the same amount of distribution into all of these networks. You as an application developer focus on building out more features and functionality into your dApp, and then you plug into us. And as we are the ones that deal with adding more chains to the network, right? And then as we add those chains, you have this network effect that you automatically get access to all of that liquidity and distribution within those chains. So it's like an infrastructure layer that allows you to focus on your app, And we kind of deal with the composability between blockchains and allow you to have access to those.
Now, when we're talking very practically from a developer perspective, an advantage that I'm seeing immediately here is if I learn cross-chain procedures using Axelar, and I'm using 2 chains to start with, but then later on I want to add on a third, also supported by Axelar, I'm not going to have to relearn how to do that. The methods that I used for my first cross-chain implementation, I assume I can just reapply those when adding the other chain. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So like what we're saying is build on one chain, and all of the messages that are composable between one blockchain that we're connected to are going to be composable with them all. So there's a translation layer that essentially allows the application logic to translate between blockchains. And that's like and then a routing layer, which routes it to those blockchains. So I think the way, like, so high level, right? The reason why you build is like, why are you siloing yourself into one total addressable market when you can have them all? Like, that just doesn't make sense. Like, build an application that can scale. And then 2, as we, add more blockchains and more complexity, right? It just allows you to get access to them. And it's actually fundamentally just a more simple and scalable build. So you're going to have, you're going to be able to build a more robust and competitive application by taking this route. And I'll give you a couple examples to just like walk through how this is different, right? One of them is this concept of essentially like, if you think about a lending and borrowing protocol, if you want to have a cross-chain lending and borrowing protocol, right? Like Umi is doing this in the Cosmos ecosystem. I'll kind of walk you guys through what Prime is doing, which is an application built on Moonbeam. So if you want to have a cross-chain lending protocol, typically if you have AVAX on Avalanche, you would bridge the Avalanche over to the application on Moonbeam, and then you would be able to take a loan out on Moonbeam. But now what we're saying is instead of doing that and bringing the asset to the compute, you're actually able to send the compute to the asset, which is a more efficient process. So you're able to send a message to AVAX on Avalanche and lock that AVAX in our gateway contracts, and then still take out that loan on Moonbeam. So you're able to access global liquidity to then take a loan out on your chain. Okay, so that's example 1 of like different architectural decisions that you have to go through when thinking about like how to build these cross-chain apps.
This is exciting, Jake, because this gets right back to what we talk about all the time at Moralis about using the best tools available right now when developing our dApps. There was something when we first launched Moralis we would talk a lot about, and it was, why would you want to talk directly to the RPC node when you can use Moralis tools to fetch the actual information you're looking for, rather than performing a dozen different steps to get there? What I'm listening to you right now, and I'm getting excited because I'm hearing about Axelar, and I'm hearing how rather than creating a contract on this chain and a contract on this chain, and then when this contract does this, this one has to do this in order to keep them all in check and make sure the new coins over here actually have value. Axelar is already doing all of that on the back end and in a standardized way. So regardless of which chain you're using, you can plug in with it. Am I getting am I following you correctly at this point, Jake?
Yeah, exactly. Another kind of, I think another interesting one is some of the newer applications that are building in Cosmos, which I think is a good use case because they already fundamentally have like this message passing kind of baked into the concept, right? So Stride is a good example where they are a liquid staking protocol within Cosmos. And if you think about doing cross-chain liquid staking, right? In the traditional sense, you'd have to go and deploy your application on like every single Cosmos chain and then beyond, right? And now what they're doing is they're sending messages to go execute functions on the other chains to liquid stake on those chains, and then they're minting the derived like ST version of that asset on their chain. So they're able to do cross-chain liquid staking within Cosmos and then plug us in on top. And then for the first time ever, there's going to be one hub where you're going to be able to go and liquid stake every liquid stakeable asset from any asset on any chain that we're connected to within our network, right? And then as we add like the SWEs and the Aptoses and the Arbitrums and the Optimisms of the world, right? They're automatically going to be able to have access to all of those chains. They just need to configure their UI, and then they take those same messages that they're sending within Cosmos, and they're able to go and send them into these other ecosystems and have a one-stop shop for all of your liquid staking needs. And that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, where like, why would anybody ever go anywhere else to do liquid staking if you can do it all in one place? I truly believe that some of these like more like super apps like that are going to be like unstoppable. So that one really gets me excited as well.
I'm seeing we have both of our Moralis founders in the chat, both Ivan and Philip. And Ivan actually has a question for us already. I know the answer to this, but I'm going to let Jake answer. Does Axelar have a token?
We do. It's the AXL token. I'm not supposed to do a lot of talking about it, so I think I'm going to leave that one there. But it is.
It does exist, and we'll leave it at that for this stream. But if you're the type of person who is interested about that, now you know. AXL.
Yeah. So we are a blockchain, right? So our token actually like is like, from a features and functionality standpoint, like it pays for gas on the network. A user never has to own that because we have gas services built into the network, but it's also acts as a governance token.
Excellent. So the expected blockchain utility there, and it would certainly usefulness amongst that token in a way that we would normally expect. Good info, Jake. Not to disrail you with that comment.
No, I mean, it's relevant, right? Like our architecture is what makes us like significantly different than everybody else in the space. And we can kind of dig into that in a sec when I pull up the Block Explorer. But I think another example of an interesting application, kind of similar to that Stride like concept, is like doing yield aggregators, right? Like if you can have, like, it is hard to, you have to like have your finger on the pulse of what's happening in each ecosystem to go and find the pools that are going to have the most liquidity, the highest yields, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're able to offer a cross-chain yield aggregator, I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend this. Like there's a lot of people building this stuff already. But if an application can give you peace of mind that they have people that are going and finding the best pools with the highest yields across all chains, and then you can bubble up those best pools and deliver them to somebody and offer like the highest yields, like why is a user ever going to want to go anywhere else, right? Because you're giving them the best of all worlds rather than just the best of the ecosystem that you're playing around in. And then the last one I wanted to talk about was just, we have a project called JPEGs that's building out cross-chain NFT lending and borrowing, right? And the concept that I really want to drive home here is like, yes, that will be a great application. But what I've pushed them to think about is like, yes, you can have your application and this is going to be a great like B2C project, but why would you stop there? Why don't you build out an SDK and then go and have a B2B angle? And you can actually go find, like we've found a couple great use cases for this already, but we found that there's a big demand in games for doing cross-chain NFT rentals and borrowing. And what the games actually want, they don't want to be sending people to this like middle step, right? Like Axelar allows you to have these like stacked messages that enable these one-click user experiences. So now what they're kind of pushing is going to these games and saying, hey, we're going to enable cross-chain NFT renting and borrowing within the front end of your app. You can build out your own UI. We have a UI that you can use and like you can plug it in if you want, but you can build out this functionality right into the front end of your application. And then you have a great B2C play. And with the exact same technology, you're able to bring that into a B2B space. And if you think about stuff like, say I'm doing a mortgage company, right? Like I can have my mortgage company, but if I can also have like a little piece of the cut from every other mortgage company because they're using my technology, like that's how you kind of like dominate a market. And so like I always push people to think of ideas where, yes, there's probably utility, but then if you have a B2B angle, you can also leverage Axelar for that, right? Like I go into projects and I offer them like 5 or 6 different like infrastructure solutions that are built on top of us. unless they're like the brand new projects that we're working with, who are going to, build with general message passing baked into the functionality. For example, right? Like I can go to any application and sell them fiat to crypto onboarding via Ocado or Nova. We have Squid that's building out cross-chain swaps on top of us. So that allows you to get into an application with any other token that you have, right? And there's like 4 things that are happening in the back end of this, or 4 swaps, right? But you're still able to do that in one click on the front end of any of these dApps. And then we have just our standard SDK where you can generate a deposit address. You can plug this deposit address into a centralized exchange and in one click send that to any application on any chain within our network, right? And that's really positive because the combination of all 3 of those, you now have a one-click user experience to deploy assets into your dApp via any possible onboarding channel. So, we want to just make it as easy as possible to like start using Web3. And at the end of the day, like the user doesn't really care what blockchain your application is built on. And we're trying to enable these experiences that are just making it easier and easier for them to start using.
There's another point that I wanted to make with you here, Jake, and that's when you're using Axelar, not only are you saving time and plugging into a composable solution that increases your value, you're also benefiting from additional security. If you were to deploy yourself all of these bridge contracts in order to basically create your own cross-chain utility, which you could do, then you would have to also make sure that all of those contracts were secure and probably get some audits and things like that. And as I understand it, Axelar already has engaged in several audits on their tech, and that's published right on your GitHub page.
Yeah, I think we're at like close to 30 at this point. I know we have like actual we have like multiple monthly recurring audits that we do. So security is for sure top of mind for us.
I'm going out on a limb a little bit here, but I would say that you would be very hard pressed to find any bridge protocol that has been this thorough on checking their security, and that continues to be a huge plus in my book. As in emerging tech, security often becomes a second thought, when in reality it needs to be one of our early priorities if we're going to keep our users safe.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, that's why it's also kind of a nice place to build, because we don't build our own applications. We'll develop some stuff for use cases, and then we find a team to end up running them, because we just want to be focused on building out the most secure interoperability infrastructure possible. We don't actually want to be managing applications, because that kind of takes our eye off the ball a little bit.
Got a question here from one of my researchers, and this may lead us into what we're going to do next. Now, forewarning, we're doing largely an overview during this stream, so there may be some hands-on tips that you're going to want to reach out to the Axelar Discord on if you have specific questions, and we can also field some of those questions in our Discord depending on what it is you're working on. So feel free to reach out to us there with anything very specific. And Jake, if you want, we can link in our Discord some additional static materials for our developers too. But at that point, I'm going to hand it over to you to see, can we give a little bit of an overview? I know we talked before the stream about looking at the Block Explorer for Axelar.
Yeah. So I can definitely jump into that. In terms of the step-by-step guide, yeah, that's all in our docs. And like I mentioned before, like if anybody needs help or is building on us and wants to connect with me directly, and I can get, have the team kind of help as you guys are formulating ideas and talking strategy and architecture, like we're very open and easy to work with. So you can either reach out to me, go into our Discord. We also have a Axelar Builders Telegram group, which has like 350 people in it right now. So like you can also get help from the community, which might be cool if you mentioned that you're in a hackathon and the whole squad can help you guys do better. But let me see if I can present my screen right now.
See, that's the thing. Anybody who's listening right now, Axelar has a vested interest in having one of the submissions that uses their protocol win the hackathon in other categories as well. So they're not going to be bashful about giving you general advice too. If you're choosing to build with their tech, then you can consider them your partner going forward. We're really careful about the sponsors we bring onto these streams, and we want them to be long-term development partners for you guys. And I know that's the case with Axelar.
Absolutely. I'm trying to share my screen. It's not letting me. Can I just?
Let me. Is it a website I can pull up for you?
Yeah, it's just axelarscan.io.
I'll present my screen and just let me be your presenter here.
Nice. Okay, awesome. So this is our block explorer, right? You can see all of the chains that we are connected to today. As I mentioned before, we have Optimism, Arbitrum, a couple other EVMs coming out, also Solana, Sui, Aptos. Most of those will be, before the end of the year. But we are really, focusing on connecting every blockchain that you would ever really want to engage with. So the interesting thing about Axelar, you can see all of our cross-chain transaction volume on here. You can actually see the state of each transaction happening across the network in real time. The whole thing is permissionless. So like if something gets stuck, for example, you can do self-relaying if need be. But when we think about Axelar's stack, right, we have a fully permissionless decentralized set of validators that's essentially listening for and approving transactions that happen across our network. On top of that, you have this translation layer that is encoding and decoding messages from different chains. And then we have this routing layer that is routing those messages around. On top of that, we essentially have a bunch of services like that gas service, right, that enable these one-click user experiences, because we don't want, like, if people needed to go and actually like pay Axelar gas fees every time, then they would need to have the AXL token. Like, we don't want users to have to do that. So everything that's been architected here is to enable these seamless one-click user experiences. And then I know I mentioned this a little bit before, but like, you don't actually build on the Axelar blockchain. You plug into the Axelar blockchain and the network via gateway contracts and API calls. And then that allows you to have the composability to the rest of the ecosystem, which is essentially, a pretty novel concept. So from a high level, like what we're seeing here is, there's so many different things that you can kind of build out on top of this stack, but this is like truly just an infrastructure piece. And I just push everybody here to be thinking like, okay, like what's a cool kind of novel application? And then if you can build on top of that and like, have that SDK functionality and leverage our BD team to like help you guys bring something to market quicker, I think that's also a really interesting concept. On top of that, I'll just kind of refresh everybody that we do have a full-blown grants program running right now, as well as an accelerator program. So there's going to be, much more support moving forward. So it's a Cosmos
Can
chain.
I pull up your
and share assets?
Your grants program here for folks to see?
Yep. And yes, I see that question from Jamie. It is a Cosmos chain, but it can talk and share assets with everything. So we have gateway contracts that are deployed on each of the different chains that we interact with.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. If anybody needs any help, again, my my Telegram is just Jake_Kane. We'll be here. We can get you synced up with anybody on our side. And then outside of that, like, yeah, feel free to reach out on Discord. I gotta double check and see what like assets we've already shared, but if there's more specific videos that I think would be helpful for everybody, I'll be sure to share those and we can forward them around.
So we've got a question here about calculating asset value. If I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jake, asset value is not tremendously important to the functions we're talking about because you'd be effectively moving the asset from one chain to another. So the value wouldn't change.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's a couple different ways interoperability goes down, right? Like some of it could be that kind of cross-chain swap, but if we are thinking about just moving an asset from chain A to chain B, you're locking it on chain A and you're minting it on chain B, or sending a message about it. So like, there's no oracles or anything involved with this. It's not something that we deal with.
And if you're that doesn't fully answer your question, I might just follow that up with, what do we call the situation when we have assets that are supposed to be equal, but one is worth more based on market value than the other? We call that arbitrage. And there's plenty of that can be read on that and how to capitalize on those situations. But yeah, this would not affect arbitrage directly.
Right. And it also brings up like the whole interest, like the privacy preserving piece of this is also pretty interesting, right? Like if you think about some of the new privacy preserving blockchains out there, like Secret, Penumbra, there's a bunch of ZK stuff going on, but being able to do something like cross-chain lending and borrowing and like locking something in a gateway contract on Ethereum and then minting a token on a privacy preserving blockchain, I think that that's like a super, super cool concept. So just, I guess, another example of how this might be interesting.
Excellent. Okay, so last question. This is a kind of a good question. So if they are interacting with Axelar Network directly, is it possible to produce wallet addresses for connected chains using Axelar?
Yeah, so we can do that. So it's that generate deposit address functionality. So we have an SDK for that right within our docs. Essentially, like with it's the routing part of like our network, right? So once that deposit address hits our network, the network understands where it needs to go based off of that deposit address, and then sends it into that dApp. So that can be, the dApp's inclusive of being a wallet. The actual like cross-chain wallet functionality is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and I don't really think anybody has nailed it from like an architectural standpoint. So like, if anybody wants to jam on that, that's like something that needs to happen, right? Like if you're going to have a true cross-chain world, you need to have a true cross-chain wallet. And I think there's like so little barriers to entry and exit within the wallet space that whoever nails this, like people will just move off of MetaMask or like whatever.
So in my mind, as a researcher, here's the problem you should be thinking about if you're approaching that as a possible project. You need to ensure that somehow, and I don't know how you would do this given the current state of the networks, but you need to ensure that the user isn't heavily inconvenienced by what asset what network the assets are sitting on. So if you have USDC sitting on Ethereum and you have it sitting on Polygon, it does not cost the same to move those assets. And depending on where you're moving them, the cost could be hugely different. That you need to somehow overcome that, because the user doesn't care. He just wants to send, or she just wants to send from address to address. And they want it to be simple. And they want to have one cost, regardless of what network they're using. And that we haven't quite figured out yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like in many cases, like if you're going to be doing cross-chain, a true cross-chain application, like you can get liquidity from everywhere else, but you like want speed. Yes. And I think that's often like pretty interesting. But excited to see what everybody builds. Definitely like run your ideas by me. I love talking about this stuff and helping people from an architectural standpoint. So it's what I spend all day doing.
One more question here. It says, can I create a multi-chain wallet using Axelar? I'm going to go ahead and give a comment on this one here. I think that if you're planning to build a multi-chain wallet for this hackathon, Axelar is going to be a great tool for you to use. However, for showing balance data, showing that balance data in a fiat number, things like that, Moralis is actually going to be your best friend when it comes to sending a message between two chains or moving something from one chain to another, or cross-chain liquidity. That's where Axelar is going to be your superhero.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess also on that, right? Like what I've been seeing just generally in the wallet space is that these wallets are like, especially after MetaMask just allowed like ACH transfers from bank accounts. I think that a lot of people are kind of moving away, or potentially, you know, moving away from centralized exchanges towards decentralized exchanges. And then I see like that evolution kind of like is more people just are going to end up like staying in their wallet, and the wallets are bringing like all of the best applications to their users, and like being the one hub where like you don't really need to leave. Like stay, like once you've got if you have the users, like you can win the game, right? If you make it so that they never really need to leave. So just interesting. I think that like doing infrastructure around wallets is a great place to be thinking, because like that's where I see the world going, right? So if you can provide something for a wallet that's like a critical piece of infrastructure and get access to those users, like the hard part for me is like thinking about how to get the users. So if they've already dealt with that, and then you can build something that all of the wallets need, I think that that's also like a pretty interesting place to be spending your time thinking.
Got a question here. It's kind of a follow-up. If we're planning on building a dApp that incorporates a non-EVM chain, are there some docs? I'm adjusting it a little bit, but do you have some docs on specifically moving assets from non-EVM to EVM or vice versa?
It's still just a mint and a burn. So it doesn't matter. Like you rely on, so like Axelar is a Cosmos chain. We connect to all of the Cosmos chains through IBC. You're going to be able to move assets from any Cosmos based chain to Ethereum or vice versa. It's just like, you're essentially just sending a message. You're locking the asset and you're sending a message that is compatible with that chain, and like with the other chain that it's going to, or vice versa. So I kind of just think about like you're reconfiguring the rails that it's meant to like go on, but the value is not going to change or anything like that. But that's all complexity that is managed within the Axelar network. And then when you're moving it around, right, because of the hub and spoke model that we have, it can go from any chain to any chain without needing to like go back. Like it's not pairwise, right? So if you send something from Ethereum to Cosmos, and then like traditionally you'd have to bring that asset back out to Ethereum to like bring it to somewhere else, or you'd have a different denomination of that asset that wouldn't be compatible with, you know, somewhere that you want to go on Avalanche, for example. But with this hub and spoke model, you're actually able to do that, which is also really, really powerful.
Excellent. And anybody who's used Cosmos before is familiar with hub and spoke. That's a common term used to describe how the Cosmos network functions with respect to its interconnected chains. So no more details on that for right now, but feel free to look it up if you're interested in going deeper on that. Do you have another question here? Is there a way through Axelar to prove ownership of an asset on one chain or another? So I have an idea about how you might do this, but so it seems like all that would take is sending a message to the chain where you're wondering whether or not the assets are owned, and then having the user sign that they do in fact own assets on that chain. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd have to look through like there's going to be multiple ways to go about something like that. It's possible for sure. That's going to come down to like a more nitty gritty architectural decision. In most cases, like I'm definitely a believer. I don't know. I used to work at Salesforce, and like people would be like, yeah, there's 19 different ways to do this. And I'm like, nobody wants to hear that. Like tell them what to do. So I'm a believer in that. It's just something that like we would have to ask our developers about. But we like go through architectural discussions with projects all the time, because there are some nuances that you want to be looking out for when you're building this. So like we do code reviews with people and help them think about those like outlier situations where it's like, okay, yes, this would work 75% of the time, but what about the 25% of the time that it doesn't for XYZ? So that's something that we like frequently do, because we're like kind of figuring it out as well. Like there's so much to learn about like creating amazing cross-chain applications. So just like the more people thinking about it, the better.
That's a That's a great point. It's well, this is one of those situations when we're developing our dApps, we want to think about how is this signing instance going to affect our users' feeling about the dApp? I mean, let's say you build a dApp that uses all three of the networks that are providing tracks in this hackathon. You have interoperability through all three. Well, you could, now don't do this, but you could ask your user to immediately sign a transaction on every single one of the connected chains so that you can verify that they actually own all of those, know for sure that it's a balance that not only is in their wallet, but that they control. Don't do that because you haven't even shown the user any benefit yet. So why would you be asking them to sign a bunch of transactions? It is better to give them a reason why they would want to prove it to you. So if you say something like, in order to participate in this dApp, you must have this X amount of assets on this network. And you click here and it says provide proof. And then it asks you to sign. Well, I know that I'm signing to provide proof. That's why I clicked the button. And then it makes sense to me as a user. I'm comfortable with it. Think about that with where you're asking them to sign. And I'm sure that Axelar can provide the needed nuts and bolts to perform that request and get the information you need from any connected chain on their network.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Good question, though. That's interesting.
Jake, did you have anything else to add here before we wrap it up? We are going to meet over in GatherTown when we're done. So if you haven't already set up your avatar on GatherTown, click the link in the description and get ready because we're going to have a nice long round table discussion there inside of the house when you first join. I'll be there for at least 45 minutes following the stream. And I'll look forward to seeing a lot of you there as well. Siegfried from our events team will be there too. I know he's been giving some of you advice on your dApps. So, and we're here to help you guys. We are not the judging team. We are the guidance and advice team. And then when it comes to our sponsors, they will be judging. And so you may want to get their advice on exactly what they're looking for. So I encourage additional questions in those communicative spaces.
Cool. Yeah. I think the last thing, so our next workshop is going to be, it's at 11 Eastern Standard Time, which is going to be a little bit more technical where I'll still be there, but have some of the devs joining that we can kind of walk everybody through the SDK, the examples that we have. And I would expect like a lot of questions to come outside of that. Another thing I think that like I mentioned on the last call that we found like generally interesting, I actually had somebody reach out to me about this already, was figuring out how to, I don't know if this like necessarily counts as DeFi, but like thinking about how to integrate the Moralis and the Axelar APIs, right? Or the SDK.
Oh, yes. So a little bit of news on that. So at one point, and I think I mentioned this on a previous stream, we were talking about the Web3 UI kit. Now, the Web3 UI kit, an open source project from Moralis, is extremely useful for enhancing the UI elements of your dApp. It's a great tool. It has Web3 utility as well, things like that. However, there are portions of it which are in flux right now due to the recent Moralis upgrades. And so that has delayed that a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a great way that we haven't already got started on to introduce both of these protocols in the same repository. And that would be it's a very, or I should say that's an excellent challenge to put out to our community for this event. If anybody's interested in building a unity between using Moralis and Axelar, like a Moralis Axelar boilerplate, we would love to talk to you more about that and possibly give you some tips.
Yeah. I think generally that's just like we need to be thinking about how to solution like different critical infrastructure plays within the market to like, you guys are already doing this, right? Like this is your playbook. Let's make it easier for app developers to like, when you're building an application, you do the first 3 steps every single time. So let's like put this in a project and then, you save 30% of your time by just starting here. So yeah, I mean, that stuff just like generally I think is really, really interesting. Just combining a bunch of things that everybody's using anyway, kind of like how Wallet Connect does that for like a bunch of wallets and then does it, wraps a bunch of APIs and delivers it in one single interface. I don't know if that's actually how like the cross-chain wallet needs to look. And it's like a similar model to that where like you somehow do like a bunch of wrapped APIs from blockchains. That gets out of my area of expertise, but I don't know. It's just like, it's good to be thinking about that stuff, and definitely like bring it up to us if you want to do something like that later on and actually focus on adapt for this. Like, I think it would be good to just find people that are interested in doing that sort of thing.
So I'll give my own model for a basic Moralis Axelar MVP. Somebody can feel free to build this, but just like I said in the last stream, if you build anything I suggest on a live stream, just know that you might not be the only one. So you may want to add some other elements to it that make it unique and special. My vision for a Moralis Axelar combined wallet app would be an app where Moralis is used to pull balances and information from multiple chains, and then you can easily process a cross-chain function from one chain to another using one button. You just select the chain you want, select where you want to move it, move the assets over. They'll still show up inside your wallet, but on the new chain, making it easier than ever to move things between your Moralis supported wallets, continue to see the balance even after it's moved. And if you can add some UI enhancements that shows like a mail icon or something while it's in transition, that would be more than any of the Moralis wallets are currently offering, or Moralis powered wallets are currently offering. Now, could you go much further than that? Absolutely. And I recommend that you do. But remember, focus on a simple MVP. Simple MVPs win hackathons.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And our CEO says that all the time. He's like, build simply, like start simple. I think like everything that we've done, at least in Axelar, is to make it, there's a lot of really complex stuff under the hood, but nobody needs to like deal with that, interact with that. It's all about just making it as easy as possible to use, and trying to solve a real problem.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jake. I really appreciate you coming on the stream with us today. I hope everybody enjoyed our Q&A session. I'm not seeing any remaining questions in the chat at this point, which means it's time for us to move on over to GatherTown. I'll see everybody there in just a little while. And small correction on that. So today's GatherTown meetup is not for 40 minutes. It's slightly later today. So I will see everybody in 40 minutes for a 1 hour hackathon work together. We can discuss this stream. We can discuss the stream from earlier. Jake, you're invited to join us if you're available. Myself and the events team and our community engineers will be there to talk with you no matter what. Everybody have a great day, and thank you again for joining us.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Have fun.